Well, hopefully we'll start to get a few people jump on. Rose, how long would you like to give it before we sort of start officially? Another few minutes?
Yeah, a couple of minutes. That's when we said the official start is, so.
Sure.
I think that'll be fine.
We've got people starting to join now. Hello to Colleen, who's just joined. We'll just give it a few more minutes now. Rose, can you give us a bit of a tally? Have we got many people that have joined?
We've got 13 participants just at the moment.
Fantastic. Okay, well, we might make a bit of a start because I know people's time's precious and we want to keep it moving quickly so that there's some time for questions and answers at the end. For those of you who haven't met me, I'm Rebekha Sharkie. I have the great joy, the great privilege of being a federal member for Mayo, and welcome to the Mayo Community Renewables Fund grant workshop. This is going to be broken into two parts. I'm going to talk a little bit more generally about grant writing and applications, and then Rose is going to take over and go deep into the specifics about our special grant round that we're doing. And I think we're the only one in Australia that we can find where a federal member, and particularly one that's not of government, has decided to try and organise a grant round. And the reason why I've done that is because I'm incredibly passionate about renewable energy, making some meaningful action towards climate change. And so what better than to have our own little grant round in Mayo, and hopefully from little things, big things will come. So without further ado, welcome. First up, have you ever wondered why some organisations seem to have a knack for getting grants? Now, I wanted to give you a few secrets and tips to success, but before we do that, can we just have a little bit of a poll with everybody who's registered and is online participating in this? Rose, do you want to ask the question?
Absolutely. So we're just asking how many people have previously submitted a grant on behalf of their organisation? And if you have done this, we'd like to know whether you were successful in this pursuit.
So the reason why I'm asking you this question is because, you know, if you've got a lot of experience in submitting grants and being successful with your grant applications, I'm not going to I'm not going to spend a long time going through a bit of a grant workshop. We do have one that's been online for some time, and many of you may know that we, prior to COVID, we would regularly hold them out in the community, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do that again. So while those results come, I might get started. So a bit of background. Rose, can you go to the Get Project Ready slide, please?
I'm just changing. Oh, technical difficulties. Why is it not changing?
Okay, here we go. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So in a former life, one of my roles was to be part of a team that wrote large tenders, and also find a range of funding, both government and philanthropic, to run certain projects. And it is really challenging. You are fighting against, you're competing against other organisations. And we might just go back one. Nope. There we go. You're competing against other organisations, and so you've got to get project ready. And I would say, I say this over and over again, organisations start looking at grants and they start looking at lumps of money and starting to chase lumps of money without actually sitting down and doing the work about what you really need. Why are you, what projects do you want to do in the community that are going to make a tangible difference to your community's well-being. So it's really important that when you start looking at those projects that you break them down into, what are small, short, immediate things that you could do. Maybe it's some public artwork or some painting in your electorate, in your community. And then maybe, a medium-term thing is that you want to redo all of the toilet facilities in a park that you have, and maybe the long-term goals are to do a complete streetscape. So it's good to break down between short, medium and long, and then get some costings for each of those projects, and do some work on your own finances as an organisation, because some organisations have some really huge plans, but they've got no capacity to actually deliver them. So start thinking about, what is it that we can really do? Because when you can get those small projects up and happening, and then you can get those small wins, you tend to then gather a lot more support across the community who want to help you, and, from little things, big things grow. The other thing I would say is that you are competing against other organisations, other community groups with respect to community grants right across Mayo. So you need to think creatively about how you can do something differently in your community that will attract the grant organisation, the one that's handing out the funds, again, whether it be philanthropic or government. And it's really important to find champions. No one person alone in the community can do this. You need to get together a bit of a team and work together on the project. Next slide, Rose. So separate to that, getting the team ready. I've seen in too many of our communities that it's one person driving everything, and in the end, that one person really does get burnt out. So it's important to, whether it doesn't have to be an overly large team, but perhaps it's a Soldiers Memorial Hall committee, come together and share out the jobs. Some people are great at writing, other people have a lot of contacts and are able to get some quotes in, and others are really good at people. They're happy to, they feel confident to go and knock on doors and ask the community if they'd like to be involved, if they like the idea of perhaps resurfacing a hall, and what other things could be done with that hall. The hall's vacant most of the time. How can we get the most out of this for our community? When it comes time to your AGM every year, if you don't have a role on the committee for a grants officer, I would encourage you to, appoint a grants officer, or maybe it might be 2 people in a team who can work together to identify what grants are available, and that they can feed that information to the committee, and you can work on those projects and making them come to fruition. Next slide, Rose. I love this picture. Show me the money. Look, where can you find grants, ideas about grants? And often they're only open for a very short window of time, 3 or 4 weeks. And so a couple of things. If you're not already signed up to our Mayo Grants newsletter, please make sure you drop me an email, ring up the office on 83985566 and ask for Rose, and we can add you to our grants newsletter. They come out every month. Have a look on the RDA website. We'll send through this PowerPoint so that you have this to access later. The RDA website is a brilliant tool to see what grants are available in what categories. And it's free of charge, and it can really save you a huge amount of time. And we've just got down there some other grant search engines that might be of use to you, and always make sure that you are signed up to your local council websites. Often they have small grant rounds, and they're not well publicised outside of the council website. So comes time to writing the grant, what to do. I always think the best thing to do is put the kettle on, make yourself a cup of tea, and sit down and read the grant application twice before you even put, you know, your fingers to the keyboard, before you pick up a pen. Go through with a highlighter, you know, look at what the important dates are. That's really critical. You can write the most fantastic, spectacular grant application, and then you find out that it was actually needed to be submitted 24 hours ago. Please don't leave things to the last minute, and because things can happen. For instance, I remember many years ago, I was part of a team. We were running, I was taking the lead. We were writing a really big tender, and sometimes those tenders can be, you know, as tricky as for a $20,000 project as a $5 million project. But we were really careful to get ours in early. I think we got it in maybe 48 hours before closing time, and I'm so grateful we did that, because we found out from others that the website crashed, and it was incredibly difficult for when everyone else around Australia was trying to get their application in too. So, you know, you kind of, you know, need to have a contingency plan. I always like to think it's due the day before, and that way you're not stressed at the last minute. It's important to gather champions across the community for what you want to do. It does add weight to your grant application. Contact your state member, your local councillors, and please reach out to me and my office, and we'll be only too pleased to offer our support for the project that you want to do. Once you've completed your application, most of them are online now. See if there's a way that you can print it out if you're like me and you like to read things and have that, you know, tangible paper in your hands, and make sure you've answered every question. That's the really important part to it, because having written grants, but then also been on the other side, on the decision-making side with respect to grants, it's really important you answer the questions, because, as I said, you can have a brilliant idea, but if you haven't answered the questions put forward, if you haven't made sure that you are very clear and detailed on in your responses, your application can be put to the bottom of the pile and deemed ineligible. So next slide, grant, writing your grant. Don't forget to ask for support. I just mentioned that on the previous slide, but look, it's really important. Reach out to me, reach out to local government councillors, your state MP, people in your community who have been great champions of this, who are well known in the community. make sure you give us all a bit of notice. With respect to our office, we do ask for at least a few days because we want to write a response that is personal and that really shows that we've put the time in to know all about your project. A bit of another poll here. Rose, do we have the response to the first poll?
Yes, so Mitch is just sharing that with me now. I think we had 12 responses. So 12 responses for the first poll. Everyone had previously applied. And everyone had previously applied for a grant.
Ah, lucky I'm whipping through these then.
And 83% of those people had been successful.
Okay, that's brilliant. Excellent. Now we've got another quick question. Have you contacted our team to request a letter of support for your any grant application in the past? I love to know about different projects that are happening across our community. So please, take the time, send us a quick email, make a quick phone call because we'd love to support. Okay, next one, Rose. Okay, I think we've got enough time now for slide 7. Can we go back to our PowerPoint?
I've swapped it over. Can we not?
Okay. Need some thinking time. We need some thinking music here.
We're ending the poll now.
Okay. Oh, right. Community support. Now, a good grant application has a depth of community support to it. And it's worthwhile. I think it's quite valuable when you can detail the kinds of in-kind contributions that you have to go towards your application, because that does show that the community essentially has skin in the game. Now, they can be tangible goods, they can be intangible. We're really fortunate right across Mayo that we have a lot of tradies. I know a lot of our applications have some support and time donated by local tradesmen in our areas, and that's really valuable. Sometimes as an organisation you feel uncomfortable asking local tradesmen to donate the time. Many are super busy, but look, the worst they can say is no. I always think it's better to ask, and there's often ways that you can, make sure that that individual or business that you can show your appreciation to them. They love, from what I understand, love being invited to any unveilings, and really just showing that they're a part of our community too. Okay, the golden rules of grant writing. Sometimes, next slide, Rose. Okay, some really simple ones here. And one that I think is really important, and make sure the contact details for your organisation are correct. We had a grant round quite recently, and we were trying, Rose was getting very stressed. She was constantly trying to call a person who was on the application form. This was, I think, for a Stronger Communities grant, and it was getting to the point where it was the cutoff. And extra information was needed by the decision makers at the federal government level, and we found out that that person was no longer engaged and involved in the project. So it's really important that you have as much contact details as possible, preferably even a couple of names on your application form. Sometimes a chair, as well as maybe the grants officer and potentially the treasurer. Make sure that your writing is neat. If you are handwriting or on the computer, that you're just using a basic font to write in, not some sort of elaborate cursive font. It makes it much easier for the person who's assessing the grants to understand what you are asking for. Don't pad out your applications looking for the maximum amount. just because, you know, the grant says it's up to $10,000 or $20,000. Ask the amount that you need, because people who are assessing grants are pretty crafty and they can see, well, hang on, we've got 3 applications for the same style project. One's only asking for $4,000, the other is asking for $10,000, which is just because it's the maximum amount. They're both going to deliver the exact same project. So it's really important that you just, you know, ask what you need, and that, I think, gives your application a greater strength. If you are unsuccessful, ask the grant provider for feedback. Perhaps they were not looking for delivery, you know, perhaps there was a particular focus, perhaps it was on tourism, perhaps it was on some kind of community need. Triple check all the postage and email addresses before submitting your application, and always make sure you're not wasting your time applying for a grant if your organisation or your project is not eligible. Okay, next slide, Rose. Okay, success. Now what? Make sure you share this good news story. We don't have enough good news stories in our local media. Post pictures on social media. Share with your community, because what we find is that when there's success in a community, that then builds other successes and momentum to it, and people start to get a little excited about seeing change and seeing improvement in the local community. And it's really worth taking the time to celebrate, because it's hard work getting projects up and happening in our community. So you really need to be able to celebrate, and then you need to do the acquittal, and that way you're all back to square one and ready for another grant in the future. Now, I am going to pass on to Rose, because now we're going to talk specifically about the Mayo Community Renewables Fund. And Rose, over to you to deliver.
Thank you, Rebekah. So as Rebekah said, we're very excited about this new grant round, and we're really keen to be able to provide some assistance to community groups across Mayo to support them with some really tangible grassroots level projects to improve sustainability throughout electorates. So exciting news. So this first page is a bit of a visual depiction of how we can go about applying for putting forward an expression of interest for this particular grant round. So there's just some screenshots on the page up here so that you can see the various steps go through. So very simply, you access our services tab, and once the services tab is available, then you can select the EOI option. All right, sorry, we're just having some issues with our internet connection here in the office, but I think we're all back now. All right, I might need to share the screen again though. Rebekah, can you see the PowerPoint still, or are we?
No, I can see your lovely face.
Okay, let's try this one again. All right, is that a bit better?
Certainly is. And can you turn up your microphone a little bit, Rose?
Let me see. Is that better if I speak like
there
this?
We go. That's brilliant. Thank you.
All right, no worries. All right, sorry about that, everyone. We had some technical difficulties. We're back on track now. So as we said, EOI process is quite straightforward and all accessible from our website. And just really important to take note of that date on the 23rd of March, which is a Wednesday, and at 5 p.m. As Rebekah mentioned previously, it's always a good idea to try to get something in a bit earlier than the cutoff date, just in case anything goes wrong. And we won't be able to, unfortunately, accept any late applications. So really important to take note of that. And once we have this PowerPoint available, you will be able to access that link directly to take you to the expression of interest page. So I just wanted to clarify some key points about an expression of interest or an EOI, because it is quite a different art form to the formal application. So we just want this expression of interest phase to be quite quick and easy for whoever it is that's submitting it on behalf of the organisation. So we don't want people to be spending hours on this, especially since there isn't any guarantee at the end of it of a very successful application. So some key things to keep in mind when you're putting forward this expression of interest is we want a brief description of the project and a summary of costs. So we don't need the exact quote, but we do need some indication of a price range that you'll be asking for within the application. We want a description of how the project meets the fund's goals. So whether that is, decreasing your cost for electricity or increasing your sustainability. And then we want how your project represents value for money, as well as a summary of how you think this particular project will benefit the community in which your organisation sits. So it's important to keep in mind that at this particular stage in the process for this grant, we don't need really detailed quotes. We don't need you to provide the quotes that you might have asked for from different providers. We don't need photographs of the site. We don't need those support letters. Those are all things we're going to ask for during the formal application stage. Sorry, we're just waiting. Yep. All right. Okay, in terms of this particular fund, we're just having a bit of a talk now about the eligibility. So we're asking for people to apply who have a not-for-profit status and who have an ABN. But if these things are not possible within your organisation, that doesn't necessarily. So we are asking for people to consider the option of perhaps being sponsored by a group that's different to their own organisation. And this is entirely possible as long as the sponsor meets all of the eligibility criteria. And it's important to keep in mind that if this is the situation, that the sponsor is happy to drive their application. So they're the one who's going to be listed on the application form, and they'll be the one that needs to submit all the formalised paperwork. So on this next slide here, we're going to talk about how much money is available. So there's a total pool of $100,000, and we're asking for applications for grants that range between $2,500 and $10,000. And 100% of your project can be applied for in terms of funding. So there is no requirement for groups to contribute towards this particular funding. However, panelists will be looking quite favourably upon any kind of in-kind or monetary contributions that the groups might be able to make. So as Rebekha touched on previously, this doesn't necessarily have to be money. It can always be volunteer labour or tradespeople's time. There's a whole range of ways that you can show your dedication and commitment to the project. So just speaking specifically about the kind of goals that this fund is seeking to achieve. So we're really wanting to support community groups to help them with installing renewable energy sources or to expand their current capacity in terms of their renewable energy. So things that we're looking towards supporting are reducing energy costs, specifically in terms of electricity, because we're aware of how much of a burden this can be for a lot of smaller community-based groups, to increase sustainability, reduce environmental impact. And so the kinds of projects that we're looking for are things like solar panels, electric vehicle charging stations, or batteries. So tangible projects that really represent that kind of grassroots level climate action towards a more sustainable future. So after we have received our expressions of interest, we will be arranging an independent panel to assess these. So these panelists will include experts in the field who have a lot of experience in terms of renewable energy sources. So we're going to be asking panelists to look over the expressions of interest that have been received. And as we've touched on previously, some key things that panelists will be looking for will be alignment with the eligibility and the criteria listed in our guidelines, which are available on the website. A broad community benefit, so not only a direct benefit to the group or organisation who are applying, but also their community. Value for money, and a very clear project outline. As Rebekha touched on previously, we want to try to make it as easy as possible for the panelists to see what it is that you're wanting to achieve and how this is going to benefit the community. So after we've held our panel, all groups, regardless of whether they've been successful or unsuccessful, will be notified by email, and we aim to do this as quickly after the panel as possible. If you have been successful with your expression of interest, we'll then ask groups to submit a formal application, which will be a more involved and lengthy process. And this is where we want to see a bit more detail about the project, some very specific costings, perhaps some photographs or support letters, all of that kind of information to bolster the application that you're putting forward. So on the screen here, we have a bit of a timeline, another visual representation of the kinds of steps or processes that you can anticipate occurring. So we'll notify both successful and unsuccessful applicants about their expression of interest. And this will happen very soon after we hold the panel, which should be towards the end of this month. Then we'll have applications on a formal level distributed, and this will be either in hard copy or digitally, depending on which the group would prefer. Then the applications at a formal level will be due on the 12th of April at 5 p.m. These applications will then be assessed by our team in the office. And then following this, grant agreements will be distributed. These need to be signed and returned prior to commencing the project. So we have a really clear idea, both the group and our team, about the project that is going to be finalised. After this has happened, we're going to ask groups to make sure they keep records to evidence the project's progress. So this might be things like photographs, keeping invoices, or a bit of a time frame, so we have a very clear view afterwards of the way that the project has progressed. We'll then ask groups to submit an end of project report, and all of these kind of information side of things about what we want included in that report will be available when we do distribute the grant agreements. And we'll ask for any invoices to be submitted prior to funds being released. So that concludes the formalised section of this particular workshop, but we've got some time now. So if anyone has any questions about this particular fund or about grant writing in general, we'd love to hear from you. So I think we've got
can I just say something quickly, Rose?
Absolutely.
I just want to be really clear. I'm not the decision maker. We've managed to put this money together for Mayo, but I'm not the decision maker for who is successful and not successful with this grant round. I think it's really important that there's a distance for governance purposes between me and the organisations. However, when the expert panel decides and you've got your grant up and running, I'd love to come and see what your project looks like.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rebecca. And Mitch has just shared with me there's been some feedback that apparently the sound is difficult for some people on the other end, and we do apologise for that. But I will just reiterate that this is being recorded. So if you've had difficulties either viewing things or hearing things, everything will be available later. It'll be available through our website and also on our Facebook page. So that will be out to you shortly.
Terrific. So does anybody have any questions?
We haven't had any questions come through yet. If there's any that are still writing, we'll wait a few more moments, but otherwise, of course, you can always contact us at the office by phone or email if anything pops up afterwards.
Okay, question, Rose, what date is the expression of interest due?
So the expressions of interest close on the 23rd of March, which is a Wednesday at 5 p.m.
Fantastic. Also, Rose, I've got a bit of a question. I know that, there has been some applications that have already gone into you. If an organisation has put in an application to you already and they've now watched this and perhaps they might have a bit of a change of heart around exactly what the project's going to detail, could they basically replace an application with one that's already in? So, ask you to remove the previous one and send in an amended application.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very straightforward process. So all I ask is that either they send me an email or call the office. I'm happy to have a chat, and then we can specifically organise which one they want to keep and which one they want to remove. So there's no confusion about which one is kept, but that's no problem at all.
Fantastic. Just wait. Is any other questions from the audience? We've got one here. Are you applying more or less weighting to reducing electricity costs versus increasing sustainability?
Well, I guess it was a bit of a combination of both, wasn't it, Rebekah? So the main goal of this particular fund, I guess, is towards that kind of climate focus. So definitely improving
that reducing your carbon footprint.
Exactly. So I think panelists will be looking for kind of a combination of each of those goals that were outlined previously.
And any other questions? If you have a question that pops into your head, you know, perhaps later in the day or maybe in the middle of the night, feel free not to call us in the middle of the night, but feel free to put it on an email or call Rose during office hours, and she'll only be too happy to step you through any queries that you have. We might go to the next slide now, Rose, just to a bit of a reminder on what we can do in the office. So we offer a grants newsletter. Make sure that that you are signed in to receive those, and we won't spam you. It's pretty much once a month you'll get a grant newsletter. Chat with Rose in my team about any project ideas that you have. Just in the last fortnight, I've been down to a number of organisations who are sharing with me, number of clubs who are sharing with me their future ideas for growth of their and upgrades. It's really great for me to know what it is that you're needing to do. You know, perhaps you're still working with portals. Some are, you know, and you have an amenities block. If I know about it, then I can go into that for you too. And when we see grant applications come out for particular grants, I can say, hey, Rose, you know, let's make sure that we contact Langhorne Creek about this one or that one. And don't forget to ask us for letters of support. I'm only too happy to support what you're doing in our community. So that's the end of our presentation, and I hope you found this of value. We will have it recorded so you can access it later, and we're hoping that we might have inspired you to put in an application for this really exciting grant round. I'm hopeful that we get to see a lot more renewable energy projects in our community, and hopefully those will then create the next round. So we want to see, I'd like to see that we have communities that are resilient and that we are really leading our part of the world, Australia, with respect to tangible, real action on climate. So thank you again, and look forward to chatting with you and seeing you again soon. Thank you.